last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Hey everyone, welcome to Strong Mind, Strong Body. I'm your host, Angie Miller, and I appreciate you joining me on my show and on the NASM Podcast Network. So I'm wondering, have you ever had a goal or a dream or something you really want to do, but you've got all these, quote, obstacles? And oftentimes later when you look back, you're like, those are really in my head. Those were perceived obstacles, these barriers that I put in front of myself that I told myself I couldn't do it, or I would do it when this happens or that happens. I feel like I can't be the only one out there who does this, who creates these perceived barriers and keeps putting things on the back burner. So as the summer comes and the weather warms up, I thought, what a perfect time to both talk about being outdoors and having a hiking experience, but also to overcome perceived barriers. So my show today is called What's Stopping You? And I have a hiking fitness coach, Marcus Shapiro. He spent over 30 years helping clients do exactly what I just said, transform these perceived limitations and to turn them into stepping stones for success. So in this episode, Marcus is going to talk about the psychology behind having unstoppable confidence. That right there would have me, right? That gets my attention. And also how to reframe obstacles into opportunities and why asking for help isn't a weakness, even though I think so many of us see it as that. So maybe you're not dreaming of scaling mountains, and that's pretty fair. But I do believe that this show is applicable to any dream or any goal that you have, because all of us have personal barriers. And so what I really want is that we stop putting up our dreams and start acting today. So I'm going to bring Marcus into the show and have him introduce himself.
Hey, Angie, how are you?
I
Good
am
to be
doing
here.
well, Marcus. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I really love what you do and what your brand does. And tell us where you're coming from.
So I'm coming from just north of Atlanta. We live close to the Chattahoochee River, so there's lots of fun hiking that I have done with my children, and it's very accessible. But then just to the north, we've got Blue Ridge Mountains, Yap Mountains. So I'm pretty excited to be here. I grew up in Miami, so it wasn't until later in my life that I really got into hiking and backpacking and so on.
You know, it's funny because that's the same with me. I didn't grow up. I always say I didn't grow up sporty spice, but I also just didn't grow up hiking. I mean, I grew up in Iowa. I'm not sure there's a lot of hikes in Iowa, but ever since like my oldest daughter moved to Colorado and my sister and I used to take a lot of hiking trips, and now I absolutely love it. Plus, I live by the Blue Ridge Mountains. So,
Okay.
Marcus, you've helped thousands of people tackle what seems like impossible goals. What do you think is kind of the most surprising barrier that you think people create for themselves?
Well, some of the barriers are self-imposed, and some of them are legitimate barriers. Um, and I'm going to mention several that are very common that my clients express to me, because I will always ask, along with getting medical history, exercise history, I always ask for biggest concerns. And so a lot that I get, I'm going to mention them to you, and we can talk a little bit about them. But I often get people saying that they're too old. Okay, they're concerned. Maybe their age would prohibit them from successfully summiting Kilimanjaro, for example. They don't want to be the slowest in the group, and so oftentimes people are traveling with family or with friends, and they're afraid that they're going to hold up everybody. That could be embarrassing. And that can spoil it actually for the rest of the group as well. Oftentimes they get people, they say they don't want to get injured during training. Breathing at altitude is common. And knees bothering them downhill. And of course, I get a lot more. But any of those some are legitimate. In fact, they all can be legitimate, and they all can be self-imposed. It just depends. But when I go through all my questions, I can identify what the true issues are. But I'm confident talking anybody through any of these, and we can get into them if you want.
Yeah. And when you were saying all those, I thought every single one of those makes sense to me. I could totally see where people would get into this mindset of I'm too old. I mean, let's face it, when people over the age of 15, they start getting stuff from ARP, it's just this message that, gee, your time is coming up here. And so, in the too slow, I know my husband uses that one a lot. I'm too slow and you get annoyed with me because you want to go fast. I'm like, true. But, and then can't deny that one. The injury one, that's another one he uses. Don't tell him I told you. My knees hurt. And then, of course, the altitude, because that is a huge one. And if anybody's ever had altitude sickness, that's no fun. And so, yeah, all of those make perfect sense to me. But before we kind of, tackle those, I have some other things, and I kind of feel like we're going to unpack those as we go along. But I do appreciate that you said those are both perceived, but also real, right? Like
Mhm.
knee pain is real. The risk of
Mhm.
injury is real. And yet, is it true that if people train properly, they probably could set themselves up for success despite all these?
Yeah, and that is the point. So while some of them are legitimate and some are self-imposed, I think we kind of through proper training and the specificity of training, particularly for hiking, we can overcome all of those. Oftentimes, the clients they have booked with a tour operator, and so they not only have the training and the confidence from having prepared for the rigors of the hike, but they oftentimes have a guide, a professional guide who is familiar with all of these concerns and can help mitigate risks along the trail. Talking about breathing at altitude. I mean, one of the biggest things that you need to do to mitigate, the headaches that you might get and the problems and the issues with being in that high of atmosphere. You got to keep it slow. You got to keep your respiration slow. You got to keep the muscle burn to a minimum, which is where hiking poles comes in, particularly for the quads.
Hmm.
So keeping a slow pace, guide can mitigate that, and of course being in perfect shape for hiking. Um, so
Yeah, in perfect
it's a
shape.
team effort really when it comes to an adventure.
Yeah, and I like what you said too, because I do think with some of those bigger hikes, obviously, um, you probably do have to have a guide, both because you can't get in without a guide and also for safety purposes. So, in all your years of doing this, I love stories, and I'm just kind of curious, what's the most powerful transformation you've witnessed? Like when a client has this mindset about what this is going to be like from when they first come to you versus when they achieve their goal.
Sure. So I actually had a client, Matt. So Matt is a flatlander from Miami, and the flatlander is termed for someone who does not really have hiking available, either infrequently or really at all. So Matt had a really ambitious trip to go to Arizona, and he did a 3-day trip. He would do an easy hike on day one with some fun scrambling. Day two, he was going to summit the highest mountain in Arizona called Mount Humphreys. It's just under, I think, 13,000 feet. And then he was going to do rim to rim in the Grand Canyon in one day. Okay. That was day three. So that's about 22 miles and about 6,000 feet of elevation gain. So Matt is prepared. But in day three, coming down into the canyon, he didn't time his eating properly. So he developed kind of an acute case of hypoglycemia. Had a really hard time. The guide stuffed his face with with a lot of high glycemic foods, and really tried to get him to catch up. And so, long story short, he comes out of the canyon, um, crying, because he was just so happy with himself that he was able to achieve it. And then, but Matt, the next year, he decided that he's going to overcome the fears that he had, and not the perfect success, let's call it, in that first adventure. So he goes out to the Chicago Basin, which is in Colorado. You take a train out there and they drop you off in the middle of nowhere. So he and the guide, they go out, they backpack, and then looking out, there's 14,000 foot peaks. And day one, he summits the first one, and the second one, he just doesn't make it. And that, a lot of it had to do with sleep issues, and the challenges, he could have made it, I think, but it was a lot to do with sleep. But guess what? He comes back to me for a third year, and in the third year, goes out to Aspen and summits Mount Sopris, and I think it was Castle Peak. The other people that were in the group couldn't make it the second day, but Matt crushed it. I mean, he crushed it, and he was so confident, and he was so excited, and he just continues to build his bucket list. So,
isn't that so cool? Because it just is kind of testament to how you set a goal, you achieve a goal, and then your mind says, aha, what next? And you want more. And that's so true. I think that's testament to, they come in, they've got these perceived barriers, they get through it, and then they're ready for more and more and more. And even though we did have some setbacks, they proved to be kind of learning opportunities. Like, next time this happens, I need to remember that I have to have proper nutrition throughout, that type of thing. So that's a great story, because I feel like all of us have experienced that, whether we're training clients or coaching clients, or just even as humans who set goals. So I think too, though, what I really hear you say is there's a correlation between physical and mental. And that's the space that I love, is what's the mental component that goes along with achieving physical goals. So what do you think, in your experience in working with clients, what's that relationship between physical challenges and mental strength?
well, I think one begets the other, and vice versa. So I think, like, physical challenges, mental challenges can be like alternating stepping stones that kind of actually lead you to your goals. So let's say you have like a mental, or yeah, like a mental challenge, and then you seek help. You take steps towards overcoming that mental challenge, and then you crush your physical challenge. And then that gives you the confidence to then do another adventure of some kind. And then, of course, it's not uncommon. You're going to have another mental challenge again.
Yeah.
And then, then you train for it, and then you overcome that physical challenge. And so I still look at it kind of like stepping stones. And I had a client named Dermot, and he lived in Chicago, and he didn't have very much backpacking experience at all. And he was invited to go on a trip by some friends, and he was really intimidated by it. It was, let's see, I think it was like an 8-day backpacking trip. And think, if you've never really done it before, and you're going to go on an 8-day packing trip, that's going to be really intimidating. So he reached out to me, and we actually trained for like 16 weeks. And he had kind of one, I wouldn't call it a setback, let's call it the mental like challenge. It was a milestone challenge that I set up. He didn't have any hiking available. So the milestone challenge was, I think it was about, you had to do 4,000 feet of elevation gain. And with no hiking, you can't do that. So how do you do it? And so I had him stack the challenges. So he had to do treadmill for 2,000 feet of elevation gain, and then he had to climb stairs for 2,000 feet of elevation. Not a stairmaster, going up and down stairs with pack weight. And he told me later on that he just about quit in that moment doing the stairs. He's like, I just don't know if I can do this. And so anyway, he gets up through it and he goes on his trip, and there's some altitude. So he has a few issues on the first couple days. And then by day 3, he actually described it. He was like just shot out of a cannon. He acclimated, and all of a sudden, all the fitness and the hard work came in. And the group was actually, they were fussing at him because he was getting way too ahead. And you got to stay together in these backpacking experiences. It's just safer to do that. So he was so excited, and he actually reached back out to me. He's going to do a rim to rim Grand Canyon. So he's ready for his next adventure. So.
You know, Marcus, the whole time that I'm listening to you, I'm like, I'm too comfortable. I got to do something. And it's funny because from the moment I met you, that has been my thing is, okay, I need to prep. Marcus and I both know a gentleman named Glenn who is on my show, and he takes these trips. And I'm like, I need to get a little more uncomfortable when it comes to hiking and do one of these backpacking trips. And you're really inspiring me. And then at the
Okay.
same time, my mental is going, but I do agree. I look at like mental and physical, it's like 2 different staircases. And sometimes if you get over the mental, then the physical follows. Because I always say body confidence leads to emotional confidence and vice versa. And so I feel like it's like a little play off of each other. They date each other, and you have to get them both kind of in alignment. But sometimes the mental strength can carry the physical strength through, and sometimes the physical strength boosts the mental strength. So I do think that you can't have one without the other. But you are absolutely challenging and inspiring me. So I know that when
Thanks.
you train people, yes, you might be getting a phone call. Be careful. I know that you train
Okay.
people. You use this method called the Big Five. Okay. Can you give us like a brief soundbite version of what are your big 5 that if I want to prepare for one of these hikes that we're talking about, how are you going to get me started?
Okay.
Rim to rim would be my first one, by the way.
Okay. All right. That's great. Very doable, non-technical, very challenging, and it's also a domestic, if you're in the United States. So it's a great first one. So it's the Fit for Trips Big Five. And the reason why I came up with it is because most of the people that contact me don't have access to hiking, or they have limited access to it. So the whole idea of a specificity of training, which is like if you're a football player, you do football things. If you're a tennis player, you do tennis things. If you're a hiker, you got to do hiking things. So, well, if you don't have hiking available, what are you going to do? So that's where the Big Five comes in. So you want to walk, 1, you want to walk inclines. 2, you want to walk stairs. 3, you want to do walk lunges. 4, you want to walk far. And 5, you do HIIT training. And the reason, and what's great about that, and what helps my clients get more confident is, especially when I'm talking with somebody, let's say in like a consultation, and I talk about the Big Five, it actually gives them a prism through which to look through, and they can start to kind of like imagine, oh yeah, I have stairs. Oh, okay, I can do treadmill. Yeah, walk lunges and whatever. And so it's been pretty successful. And I do get people online that sometimes fuss at me and don't like when I say that you don't have to hike to get in shape for hiking. It certainly makes it easier, especially if you have rocky terrain. But there are ways to mitigate that, with balance and using like Bosu ball, or using like everybody uses forget the name of the mat, Eric's pad, something like that.
Mhm.
So anyway, they've been very successful.
Yeah. Well, people are always going to fuss at people. Everybody's always going to have an opinion, and everybody's opinion is always going to, for some reason, people want to put it out there, and that's fine. But if your method works for you and people have had success, keep going. But Marcus, I want to just do a quick reset here. So my name is Angie Miller, and we are on Strong Mind, Strong Body talking about what is stopping you. And Marcus Shapiro is a hiking fitness coach, but we're not just talking about hiking. We're talking about all those reasons that you give yourself that you're not going to achieve your goals or your dreams, and what these perceived barriers are and what you can do to overcome them. So Marcus has a plan. And I do think that, again, body confidence leads to mental confidence and vice versa. So all of us want to kind of put our body and our mind to good use so that we can continue to grow and lean into discomfort. So Marcus, going back, I just want to recap some of that, what you said. You said do inclines, do stairs, do walking lunges, do HIIT training, and walk far. And I hope I got that right, but I thought that those were all good. And actually, those are good for everyday people, right? I mean, for the most part, so that could help with anyone. Um, so lots of things are coming to my mind right now, but confidence is a big one. I I feel like everything that we do in this world underneath is confidence. Do you feel, or self efficacy, if you will, do you feel you have what it takes to achieve what you put your mind to? And so many times it's the confidence piece. It's that little voice that won't stop talking, that radio station that you're like, oh, I want to change the channel. So, what is your secret for helping people maintain their confidence when either they are facing setbacks or maybe they have actually had a failure and they're like, no, I can prove to you it didn't work?
Yeah, I think having goals, establishing goals, and which I do with my clients. So every week they have distance goals and they have elevation gain goals, and then I build in what's called milestone challenges. And milestone challenges are, like I said before, we kind of stack these challenges at different intervals throughout the training. So for example, 2 weeks out from departure, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and 8 weeks out, that's where you can kind of insert some milestone challenges, and then you've got the goals weekly. So the goals are clear, and I think that's important. That helps people get more confident when they're hitting their goals. But what if they have a setback, and what if they aren't hitting their goals and hitting their stride at the very beginning? I had a client named Becky, and she was doing a rim to rim trip, and she was doing a milestone challenge. And she actually flew out to, I forget where it's at. It's somewhere in Colorado, maybe Colorado Springs or something.
Hmm.
It's called the Manitou Incline, and it's got 2,700 stairs to it.
Oh, wow.
So I guess it's a 2,000-foot staircase, but the whole thing is a 14-mile loop, and you do 4,000 feet of elevation gain. So Becky went out there and she packed too much stuff. I just never thought about, she really crammed her day pack with like tons of snacks and lots of water. We think it happened to be a little bit too much when we kind of talked about it. Anyway, it kind of tweaked her knee. So here she was preparing for, she had this setback and preparing for, rim to rim. And so I had to help her focus. It's like, okay, let's look at the goals every week and let's see, how can you get your distance without aggravating your knee? How can you get your elevation gain without doing the same? And what can you do to target to reduce that inflammation of the knee, restore the mobility that you need? And she started to see a physical therapist in that time, and we just stayed focused. We stayed really focused, and we talked every week. And she sometimes would come a little bit under the goals, but um, it didn't matter that she always hit them, which is hard to explain why. You would think that you got to hit your goals and stuff, but sometimes there's that mental toughness that someone has. And so even if they don't reach their goals, and now we're talking about something else, then they can recruit kind of a psychological aspect to it and say, okay, well, I didn't reach all of my milestones. I can recruit this mental toughness in order to do it. So kind of to answer the question, it's being very focused on your goals, and then getting help from, if it's an injury, from a physical therapist. If it's something mental, you can always recruit. Angie, you've told me what you do. I think that's kind of what you focus on. You do a lot of things. Who knows? You can you can chime in on that. So anyway, did that kind of answer your question?
100%, because I think
Okay.
that what you're really saying is it comes down to how focused are they, how prepared are they? because confidence comes from, what do they say? Practice is the mother of skill. So if you're going to be more confident the more prepared you are. All of us know what it's like to go in and take a test. I do. And you're not prepared. And so you're not confident because you didn't put sufficient time and effort into it. And I also heard you when you said sometimes people don't get to their goal for the week, but we can still overcome that. And that makes complete sense to me. And in the work that I do in therapy, here's how I reframe that. I say, okay, let's just go with something that has nothing to do with therapy, but a client says they want to lose 5 pounds and in 4 weeks goes by and they lost 3 instead. And so the reframe is you lost 3 pounds. That's 3 more pounds, or that's 3 more pounds than 3 less pounds than what you were carrying before you set this goal. Maybe it wasn't 5, but it's what you did versus what you didn't accomplish. So I think it's just really simple reframing. And sometimes people don't do that well in their minds. I trained a senior who just got COVID again. And he's like, oh my gosh, I've lost so much. And I said, and look at everything you've gained and look how much more quickly you're going to adapt because we have been doing so much training. But the mind goes automatically, what's not working? What's not working? And as coaches, we have to help people get into the reframe of what is working. And so that's really a lot of what I heard you say. But Marcus.
By the way, Becky made it, by the way.
Did she? Good.
She made it. She crushed it. Yeah, she did great.
Good, because I was listening to that going, what if I'm Becky? Okay. So
Yeah,
good.
right.
I'm glad you cleared up that little fear
Yes,
for
right.
me. So
Yeah. Yeah,
but
of course, I'm bringing up all the I think it's appropriate for this. There are so many, successes without any barriers that clients have had that have worked with me. But it's definitely a good opportunity to, in this conversation, talk about, all right, someone kind of, lost their stride, maybe got hurt, maybe felt, really challenged in their workout and felt like they couldn't move on, but everybody perseveres, so I just wanted to share that.
I think so too. And they persevere at their own pace. I think that what it really boils down to is sometimes a goal is a goal until it's not, until you realize maybe there needs to be a smaller goal that comes in between. And I think that's perfectly fine. But Marcus, I love the work that you do. I love that you help people overcome these perceived barriers and also that you get people outside and you get people into nature because you know what? Nature is free and nature is healthy for our mental well-being as well as our emotional well-being. But I want to kind of go through real quick and just, Marcus, you had said a lot of times the perceived barriers, too old, too slow, getting injured, and all the ways that you can overcome them. So is there anything else? Well, first of all, I do want to ask, how can people reach you? Because I imagine some people are like, I got a hike coming up. I want to talk to you. How do they get a hold of you?
I just go to fitfortrips.com. That's probably the best way to do it. I also have a podcast called the Hike Strong Podcast. So if they want to interview and talk to folks, that might be something that's interesting. And always on my website, they can always request a consultation. And it's free and it's fun, and you can share with me your biggest concerns, like we've talked about, and just kind of take it from there. So.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Marcus, and kind of shining your light and sharing how you get people prepared. And thanks to all of our NASM audience and all of you out there who are just looking to uplevel your mental and physical well-being. So we will see you next week.